I've read so many stories over the years, stories of betrayal, heartbreak, and secrets that could crush a soul. But when I opened the email Anna sent me, I had to stop and take a breath. Even after everything I've heard, her words shook me to my core. She trusted me to share this with you, and tonight, I'm going to read her story exactly as she lived it. Anna had been married for 12 years, to a man she believed was her safe place. She never imagined that the person who would break her heart wasn't just him but the one person she'd trusted even more. It was almost midnight the night everything cracked open. She heard her husband's phone buzzing on the nightstand while he slept beside her, snoring softly like nothing was wrong. At first she tried to ignore it, but something about that vibration felt like a warning she couldn't dismiss. She picked up the phone, her hands trembling. The message that appeared on the screen made her entire body go cold. It said, "Don't forget what we planned. Soon, he'll be ours." Anna's mind scrambled for an explanation, any explanation that wouldn't destroy her life. But when she scrolled up and saw the sender's name, her world tilted. It was Samantha, her older sister, the same woman who held her hand while she brought her son into the world, the same sister who promised to stand by her no matter what. Anna's breath caught in her throat. She thought she might be sick right there in the dark. She looked over at her husband, still breathing evenly, completely unaware that every secret he thought was safe was spilling out in her hands. Quietly, she slipped out of bed and locked herself in the bathroom. She sank to the cold tile floor, clutching the phone as message after message glowed in front of her. Words she couldn't unsee. And then she found the one that shattered her heart beyond repair. "Once she's out of the way, he'll live with us full time. He already calls me mommy sometimes." They were talking about Max, her little boy, the child she had carried, loved, protected. Her tears blurred the screen, but she kept reading, as if she needed the pain to be sure it was real. Sitting there alone, Anna made herself a promise. She would not be the woman who lost everything. She would not hand her son over to the people who betrayed her. She was going to fight for her family and for herself. When Anna shared these details with me, I could feel her pain pouring through every sentence. She told me that after that night, nothing felt real anymore. She moved around her house in a daze, watching her husband drink coffee and kiss her cheek, like he hadn't destroyed everything. Every time he touched her, she felt her skin crawl. She tried to pretend, at least for Max. He was just 6 years old, with bright green eyes and a giggle that could light up any room. Anna told me she would tuck him in at night and then collapse in the hallway, pressing her hand over her mouth so he wouldn't hear her sobbing. She didn't want her son to carry the weight of his parents' sins. Days passed in this suspended nightmare. Anna said she couldn't bring herself to confront them. Not yet. She needed proof, something undeniable. So she did what she never thought she'd be capable of. She started searching through their things. She went through her husband's briefcase, the pockets of his jackets, the glove compartment in his car. That's when she found the second phone, hidden under the driver's seat, wrapped in an old flannel shirt. She turned it on, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it, and there it was, months and months of messages, photos, and plans. Plans to take her son and start a life without her. When she told me about this, her voice cracked. She said, "Brenda, it felt like someone was peeling away my skin, like I was disappearing piece by piece. I've heard a lot of stories, but those words, they stayed with me." Anna knew she couldn't pretend anymore. She had to confront them, but she also knew she needed to protect herself. So she copied every message, every picture. She emailed them to herself, printed them out, and locked them in a safe. She wasn't going to walk into that conversation empty-handed. In the quiet hours of the night, she sat in her kitchen, staring at the proof spread across the table. She told me she felt strangely calm, like the worst had already happened and now it was time to decide who she was going to be. I can still hear Anna's voice when she told me about the day she finally confronted them. She said she woke up before dawn, feeling like she was stepping onto a stage she never asked to be on. She packed Max's backpack for school, set out his cereal, and kissed the top of his head. All the while, her heart was pounding so loud she thought it might break her ribs. She waited until her husband came home from work. He walked in with that same casual smile, carrying groceries, as if everything was perfectly normal. Anna told me she almost laughed at how ordinary he looked, like a stranger wearing her husband's face. When he put the bags down, she didn't waste a second. She laid every printed message, every photo, across the kitchen table. She said, "I know everything." He didn't deny it, He didn't even look surprised. That hurt more than any confession ever could. Then she called Emily, put the phone on speaker. Anna told me her hands were steady as she said, "Tell me the truth, for once," and Emily did, without shame, without hesitation, like she was reading a grocery list. That was when Anna realized she'd been the last to know, the only one, still pretending that her husband tried to touch her arm, but she pulled away. She told me she felt a kind of coldness take over, something deeper than anger. It was clarity. She said, "I knew then I was done begging people to love me." Those were her exact words. I wrote them down as she spoke, because I knew you would need to hear them too. After the call ended, there was nothing left to say. He kept repeating, "It just happened." But Anna told me that betrayal doesn't just happen. It's 1,000 small choices stacked up until they crush the person you promised to protect. That night, she packed a suitcase, not because she was leaving right away, but because she wanted him to see it. To know that the woman he thought would never have the courage to walk away had already started. ****, Anna told me. The strangest thing about that night was how quiet the house felt. She thought there would be shouting, doors slamming, maybe even apologies. But instead, it was silent and clean, like the end of a funeral. She lay in their bed alone, staring at the ceiling, feeling the shape of her life breaking apart around her. She said she thought about Max sleeping in the next room, his innocent face soft in the glow of the nightlight. That was what hurt the most, not just losing her marriage, but knowing her son would grow up with the memory of that fracture. Anna told me she felt like she had failed him somehow, even though she knew, deep down, she hadn't caused any of this. At midnight, her husband came to the doorway. He didn't step inside. He just leaned against the frame, looking exhausted, maybe even ashamed. But Anna couldn't read his expression anymore. She said it was like looking at a mask she'd finally recognized for what it was. He whispered, "I never meant to hurt you." And she almost laughed, because how many times had she heard that? As if intention erased the damage, as if saying sorry was some magic spell that could stitch a heart back together. She turned her face to the wall and said nothing. Hours passed. She lay there listening to him move around the house, opening cabinets, pacing the hall. Finally, settling on the couch, she realized she didn't care where he slept. The part of her that once ached to be close to him had gone numb. Donna told me she waited for tears that never came. Instead, she felt something simpler, cleaner, readiness, a decision already taking root inside her. She would not spend another decade pretending this was love. And in that moment, lying in the quiet of her ruined marriage, she finally understood, peace doesn't always look like happiness. Sometimes it looks like an empty bed, and your own heartbeat telling you it's time to begin again. Anna shared that the next morning felt strangely ordinary. She woke up before sunrise, made coffee, and packed Max's lunch, just like any other day. But in her chest, something had shifted, something irreversible. She told me her husband sat at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. He didn't try to touch her or ask for forgiveness. They moved around each other like strangers, two actors reading from different scripts. And in a way, Anna said, that was easier than another fight. As she tied Max's shoes, she realized this was the last time she'd pretend their family was whole. The last time she'd smile for the sake of appearances. She kissed her son's forehead, feeling a fierce love that made her stronger than she'd ever known she could be, before she left for work. Her husband finally looked up. His eyes were red, but there was no anger in them, no need, the hollow understanding that he'd lost her. Anna said he opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. She didn't wait for them. She walked to the door with her keys in her hand, and her heart beating calm and steady. She didn't slam the door behind her. She closed it softly, like laying down a burden, like ending a story that was never hers to finish alone. That afternoon, she called a lawyer. She told me her voice didn't shake, not even once. She was done hoping for an apology that wouldn't heal anything. She was done explaining her worth to someone who never really saw it. And as she hung up the phone, she felt the first flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Not love, not relief, freedom. Anna told me that after she made the call to the lawyer, she finally allowed herself to cry. But it wasn't the broken, helpless sobbing she'd feared. It was quiet, almost graceful, like her spirit was shedding something it no longer needed. She spent the weekend sorting through closets and drawers. Every object seemed to carry a memory, some good, many painful. The wedding album she hadn't opened in years, the necklace he gave her when Max was born, the receipts for vacations where she'd pretended everything was fine. She said it felt like packing up someone else's life, a woman she barely recognized anymore. And in each box, she tucked away a version of herself she was finally ready to leave behind. Her husband watched from the doorway. He didn't argue or try to stop her. Maybe he knew there was nothing left to say. Maybe he was just as relieved as she was that the charade was over. When she finished, she looked around their home one last time. The walls were the same, but everything else felt stripped bare. The truth had finally moved in to take its place. Anna told me she spent that night on the couch with Max, asleep on her chest. In the quiet darkness, she felt a clarity she'd been chasing for 15 years. She was scared, yes, but she was also sure that sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is let go. Anna told me she was folding Max's little clothes when her husband finally came into the room. For the first time in weeks, he looked her straight in the eye. His voice was low and hoarse, like it hurt to use. He asked if there was any way she could ever forgive him. She said she didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at him and tried to remember when she'd last felt love for this man. It wasn't there anymore, not even the echo of it. What she felt was something different, an almost compassionate detachment. He began to cry. Anna said it was a strange moment, watching the man who had betrayed her crumble under the weight of his own guilt. She wondered if he expected her to comfort him. Maybe once she would have, but that woman was gone. She told him she didn't hate him, she just couldn't stay married to someone who'd been living a lie. She wouldn't let Max grow up thinking love was something you faked to keep the peace. He asked if they could try counseling, start over, but Anna shook her head. She explained that some breaks are too deep to mend, and sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It just means you don't carry the bitterness anymore. Anna told me she felt lighter after that conversation, like the last cord tethering her to the illusion had finally snapped. She knew there would be hard days ahead, but for the first time, she trusted herself to survive them. And in that quiet ending, she felt something almost like freedom. Anna told me that after he moved out, the house felt painfully empty. Every creak of the floorboards reminded her of the life she thought they were building. She spent the first week sleeping with Max in her bed, holding him close so she wouldn't feel alone. But slowly, she began to reclaim the space. She donated their wedding photos to a charity shop. She packed up the souvenirs from trips that now felt like someone else's memories. She painted the bedroom a soft blue and bought fresh sheets that were just hers. One evening, she lit candles in the living room and sat on the couch with a glass of wine. The silence wasn't as heavy anymore. It was beginning to feel like peace, instead of punishment. She realized she'd spent years believing she needed his presence to feel safe, but safety was something she could create on her own. Anna started going to a small support group for women who'd survived betrayal. She said sitting in that circle, hearing other stories, reminded her she wasn't alone and never had been. There was something powerful in sharing her pain with people who truly understood. On weekends, she took Max to the park, where he'd run through the grass like nothing had changed. Watching him laugh showed her that children can be resilient when their mothers are strong. It gave her courage she didn't know she still had. She also started journaling every night. She wrote down everything, her anger, her hope, her questions. Sometimes she'd reread those pages and feel the sting all over again. But slowly, she noticed that the hurt began to dull around the edges. Anna said she finally understood something she'd read once. That heartbreak doesn't end in a single moment. It ends in thousands of tiny decisions to keep moving forward. Anna told me that she hadn't planned to see him again. But a few months later, he asked to meet. She agreed, not because she wanted closure from him, but because she was ready to say her own goodbye. They sat across from each other in a small cafe. He looked tired, older somehow, like the weight of his choices had finally settled on his shoulders. He tried to explain himself, offering apologies she'd waited years to hear but no longer needed. Anna listened quietly, holding her cup between her palms. When he finished, she took a breath and told him she forgave him, not for his sake, but for hers. She didn't want to carry his mistakes any longer. She was done letting him have that power. He looked stunned. Maybe he thought she would still be the woman who needed his approval. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She was someone who could let go without asking for anything in return. When she stood to leave, he reached out to touch her hand. She didn't pull away, but she didn't hold on either. She simply nodded and walked out into the sunlight. feeling lighter than she had in years. She told me that was the moment she knew she was finally free. It wasn't the divorce papers or the empty closet, it was realizing that she could look him in the eye and feel nothing, no hate, no longing, just peace. And that, she said, was worth every tear she'd ever cried. Anna told me she used to imagine that healing would look like fireworks, a grand moment of triumph. But in reality, it was something quieter. It was waking up without dread. It was looking in the mirror and liking who she saw. She moved to a smaller house near the coast. She painted the walls soft colors and filled every shelf with books she'd always meant to read. She said she finally had space to hear her own thoughts, without his voice echoing in her mind. Her daughter grew up knowing the truth, but also knowing her mother had chosen strength over bitterness. They took trips together, laughed over dinners, and built new memories that weren't stained by old betrayals. Sometimes Anna still felt a flicker of sadness, but she told me she learned to greet it like an old acquaintance, someone who no longer had the power to ruin her day. She had reclaimed her story, page by page. She wrote in her journal that she was grateful, not for the lies, but for the chance to prove to herself she could survive them, that she was more than what he took away, that no one could ever make her question her worth again. When she finished telling me everything, she looked at me through the camera, her eyes steady. She said, "Brenda, if even one woman hears this and feels less alone, it was worth it." And I believe her, because in the end, Anna didn't just survive, she became her own rescue. And that is the story she wanted the world to hear. If you're still here with me, I want you to take a deep breath and remember this: you are never as alone as you feel. Anna's story is proof that even the deepest betrayal can become the starting point for something new, something stronger than you ever imagined. I don't know what you're carrying right now. Maybe it's a secret you've been too afraid to share. Maybe it's a hurt that never seems to heal. But I promise you, your pain doesn't get to define your worth. Your choices do. Anna chose to rise. She chose her daughter, her peace, her freedom, and maybe, just maybe, her story can be the reminder you need that you can choose those things too. If this story touched you, please subscribe to this channel. Give this video a like and share it with someone who might be standing at the edge of their own heartbreak. And if you have a story of loss, resilience, or transformation, I hope you'll consider sending it to me. I'm Brenda, and here, your voice is welcome. Your story is honored. And together, we prove that no betrayal, no lie, no goodbye is stronger than the courage to begin again. Because next time, I'll be sharing the story of a woman who discovered her husband's second life on the day she buried him. You won't want to miss what comes next.